Let me ask all of you, when you first saw the cemetery, what was your reaction?
My first reaction was, this doesn't look like a cemetery. The vast majority of the headstones are either sunk all the way underground or are level with the grass. So you can't even tell anyone was buried there.
What does it mean to pick something up that you care about and follow it? Last June, as we were planning out our next year, a community member came forward and had the list of names of the people buried at the MetFern cemetery. And we said, what if we spent the year trying to find the stories of all of these individuals who were buried in the cemetery and use the skills of historians to solve a real need by righting a historical wrong? We went out to the cemetery. We gave every single student in 3 classes a name and a plot to stand over where that person was buried, and we knew what institution they'd been at, and we knew when they died, and that was all. And we got an Ancestry.com grant to go in and start doing historical research. And from there, we went into archives, we did oral history interviews, and we spent our entire year trying to frame up a story of that cemetery and where this fits within American history.
MetFern both serves as a historical reminder of how our community has failed to engage with disabled people in the past, and that while it's a great object lesson to preserve that archaeological evidence of past mistakes, it also continues to preserve the lack of human dignity that the people buried in the MetFern have never received.
We can start to connect more people to the cemetery and start to connect their stories with the people who are buried there. I think that could make a really big difference to the community.
Speaking of community, I've had several instances of people I've just encountered, and I'll mention Gann Academy to them, and because that's where I go to school, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I heard about your history project on NPR.
I had the chance to go to a memorial for Lucy Cluster, and I think that's when it really solidified that we're actually doing real work, and that's when I kind of found my place in what we were doing.
The memorial ceremony that me and Zach went to, the only reason the family even knew that their daughter was in the cemetery was because they heard news caused by Gann. They didn't know that the place even existed and their daughter was buried there.
The Jewish tradition was telling them that when there's no one else to work on the cemetery, there's no one else to think about a memorial, then that was a vacuum that they were called to step in. And I think that became a very powerful experience and motivating factor.
Everybody deserves to be remembered, whether they're Jewish or not. And as Jews, we should make it our responsibility to ensure that those people are remembered, because there have been plenty of times that we haven't been remembered. And how horrible would it be for us to not remember people that deserve it?
We as Jews, this is tikkun olam, this is, bettering the world. I think the word kavod, which is an essential Jewish concept, is about giving respect. And I feel a sense of obligation as a Jew to give respect to the people buried in the MetFern cemetery.
In the middle of one of our deep investigations into the story of one of the people, one of the students researching the life of one of the people buried in the cemetery excitedly said, I think I just discovered this about this person. And then they said, but wait a minute, I have to corroborate that. I've never seen that before in my teaching, where a student got excited by something and rather than just printing it and saying, here it is, they said, no, I'm honoring and dignifying the story of another human being. I have to make sure I get it right before I move forward and tell the story to the world.
This history class changed how I see a lot of history. Instead of dates and names, it's more of these were people who lived here, and every one of them has stories.
There's a lot more to caring about the past than reading a textbook.
I watched people cry. I saw their emotions. That's not something you get to do in a classroom. And I got to feel the really human connection around the place because there were people who were alive and came back. And I wouldn't have been able to really connect to it in such a way if I hadn't been able to be there with people who the cemetery really mattered to on a personal level.
We're making the history. We're not reading it in a book. We're listening to people's stories, generating the facts ourselves, and then
compiling that into a way which people can view it in the form of a book, in the form of a website, however we can get that information out.
I'm just kind of excited to see like it become more of a widespread topic.
There are unmarked cemeteries like this everywhere, all across America, and we need to like address every single one. Every space you go into, kind of, how can you like make that space accessible, and how can you notice when it isn't accessible? And also just like, in general, thinking about like, where is there history that we're ignoring or like sweeping under the rug, and how can we work to make that like visible?
There's nothing broken about a disabled person. Society is broken. We have to fix society to make sure that disabled people can function fully in it.
I hope that people will become more aware of disability rights and disability as a whole in general, because right now there's like less of an awareness. I think that there's always more ways that we can improve as a society.